Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Advisor. It is Ryan and Corey coming live at 9:30 like we do every morning. Today we have an awesome guest, and I'm super excited to bring quality to the conversation and be able to have somebody who has a bunch of hands-on experience executing on the things that we talk about to a completely different level. And while we don't expect anybody to become an advertising agency, you do have to sort of be a part-time media company. So I'm super excited to bring on Aaron Watson from Piper Creative. We are going to have an awesome conversation around content and business, and we will be back in a few seconds. Welcome back, everybody. And we are talking about creating compelling content. And I'm super excited to have Aaron Watson on, who I will bring on to introduce himself. And just to give you a little basis today, increasing podcast and video quality, YouTube, video retention, and something Aaron calls the Piper Rundown, which I'm really excited to dig into about his videos. So I'll bring him on and let him introduce himself. How are you, Aaron? Thanks for jumping on.
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, guys.
Our pleasure.
Spent last night digging into a bunch of your content, and I was intrigued by it all, and it was super fun. And while we'll get into it, I wanted to give everybody a basis who you are. So why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Piper Creative?
Sure. Yeah, I am the CEO and co-founder of Piper Creative. The best way to understand Piper in its current tense is primarily an agency that helps other brands produce content for YouTube, produce content for LinkedIn, produce podcasts. And that can mean a wide variety of things. That could mean a startup creating a video for a Kickstarter campaign. That could mean a Fortune 500 company producing a podcast that they distribute internally because they've got an international employee base. And when they roll out a new software, they need everyone to kind of understand why and be on the same page. And basically everything in between. So from a externally facing content marketing to an internally facing training tool, the core belief that we have, the core kind of thesis is that you can get a significantly larger quantity of content that still meets the acceptable bar of quality that's needed in order to be consumed at a fair price. And that sounds like a really simple idea, but if you think about the agencies of yesteryear, what they would do is look to sell this one-off single commercial for 30, 60 seconds and charge you tens, if frankly not hundreds of thousands of dollars for that to be produced. And the analogy that I use, I'm based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and our agency is coming up on 3 years old. And there are agencies that have been around here in Pittsburgh for 25 years, and they don't have 25 subscribers on YouTube. And I frankly just think that that's shameful and negligent to purport yourself to be a marketing aficionado and to not pay any attention to the second largest search engine on the planet.
You've scratched a few things there, specifically with that. Aaron, first of all, I've discovered you probably 24, even 30 months ago. Early, you hit my radar. I noticed what you were building out there. I've kind of followed the progression of what you and Piper have been about. I apologize for not connecting sooner. I feel like, I just as a fan of yours, I should have reached out to you sooner. But I'm interested in having a discussion today. You guys have grown so much, you've learned so much, you're doing so much, you're buying into a lot of what Ryan and I put out into the world as well, which is, why don't we find right versus try to be right? The VaynerMedia kind of, VaynerMedia has kind of coined that over the last 12 months, but it sounds like what you and Piper are doing is a lot of that as well. Let's not gamble on one piece of content. Let's put out a lot of content and see what our consumers are actually interested in. And I don't want to kind of steer this thing off the beginning. I'll let Ryan kind of steer the ship for a little bit, but I just wanted to get that out of the way and just say that I'm a fan of what you guys are up to.
Well, thank you very much. And to build off that quickly, my co-founder, Hannah Phillips, who is, infinitely more creative and talented than I am. She's 23 years old, and she tells this fantastic story about when she was little. And she does graphic design, videography, photography, all the creative stuff that actually makes us look and sound so good. And she also does painting and has had her own like fine art show. And she was taking a class from a master painter when she was in her young teens, and was told to basically stop a painting that she still thought, had 30-40% to go, and was told to just leave it there. You've done enough. And it ended up being like, voted as the best piece of work in the subsequent show with all the other students. And so we just both kind of carry the same sensibility from very different backgrounds, that we don't even necessarily know what the best expression of our work is. Like, we're trying, we're always, pursuing better. And I know that you want to talk a little bit about the Piper Rundown. The transformation in quality from November of 2019, when we started it, to January 2021 today, and what we produce, how entertaining it is, the design, the style, the presentation is exponentially better. But we could have never gotten to where we are now if we hadn't taken so many bites at the apple. So you're dead on that we're not in any way, shape, or form overly self-indulgent or romantic about the quality of what we might be producing in the present. We're really kind of seeing it as a gateway to unlocking the ability to do the fantastic transcendent piece of storytelling that we have confidence is in our future, but we have to get those bites at the apple in order to have a chance of being able to make it.
Yeah, there's so much here. Ryan, I know you probably have a framework of the conversation, and the conversation is going to lead us into what Aaron's talking about eventually anyways, but let's start from and tackle some of the things you want to get to.
So one of the things you mentioned that I would like to dig into was, you said like a basis of quality, or the lowest level quality that you think is acceptable to be consumed. Well, we're talking to advisors who spend a lot of time obviously doing their job of financial planning, and on the side they're trying to do this content. What kind of suggestions do you have for somebody for creating that minimal necessary quality to be consumed?
Well, the core idea is really taken from the CEO of Barstool Sports, Erica Nardini, and she talks about an idea that what quality meant in legacy media institutions is not what quality means on the internet. And if you follow any sort of meme account or viral video type of thing, some of the most entertaining or informative videos that I've ever consumed on the internet were perhaps shot with a shaky hand on someone's phone, probably weren't perfectly lit, probably weren't perfectly mic'd. And not to say that doesn't help in certain instances. The reality is that the fundamental definition of quality does not mean what it used to mean. And so usually the folks that get overly concerned with, is this studio quality sound? Is this, immaculate precision? Like, this may shock you guys. I don't have any makeup on. I don't have like my hair done for this presentation. I, threw some water through it, and I cleaned my face, but I didn't get, prepped as if I was about to walk on to the Today Show set or something crazy like that. And that's okay. That's not going to rob this specific presentation of its capacity to hopefully educate, mostly thanks to you guys and you keeping me on track. But like that general artifice is no longer necessary in order to produce something of really high quality. And you could take that all the way down to like the former necessity of some, stock picking show, having the multi-$100,000 set with all the talent that cost multi-hundreds, if not millions of dollars on an annual basis in order to pay to comment on stock analysis. That's just no longer necessary for someone.
Where do we draw that line, Aaron? Where's the line in that?
It's intuitive, and the framework that we always use for folks that are trying to get into this is we call the 4 C's. So it starts with consumption, and you're not going to be able to get that level because the level is not a sharp line for every single person. Someone who needs an immense amount of authority and prestige in order to do what they do, like a doctor, for instance. If your doctor comes in and just genuinely looks unclean, unkempt, and sloppy, that really concerns me because you might be cutting me open, you might be touching me. I need to hold you to a higher standard. At the same time, my comedian or some other careers, don't necessarily have to have that same bar. So you have to kind of intuit and learn where that is for your industry particular. If you're a financial advisor, I would argue that it skews slightly on the higher side, but probably, once again, not to the same high level of artifice that was once required in a later period of time. And so back to the 4Cs idea, we start with consumption. And then that consumption is basically taking in and filtering. I like this. I don't like this. I love this. I hate that. And you basically start to triangulate where your appetite is. And then you have to have the humility to recognize that if you like something, you're probably not alone. There's almost nothing that exists that only one person, if it's a really deep appreciation for, likes. Once you have that idea, then you move on to the next 2 C's, which are to comment and curate. So you don't necessarily yet need to move all the way to making your own original thing. There is immense value to, number one, being a curator of knowledge.
Your cohort's chiming in here.
Yeah, she knows. She's probably heard me say this too many times. She's probably sick of it. But the curation piece is really important, because once again, you're just taking a more skin in the game approach to that filtering and segmenting. Before, you were just doing it as you consumed in your head. Now you're actually putting your identity, your social capital, your personal brand at stake to say, this is good. You probably don't need to spend too much time on this is bad, but mostly time on this is good. And then similarly, you can just start to understand how the algorithms on different platforms work, how distribution works, through commenting on the different pieces of content that you are consuming. And like you said, Corey, like you wish you'd reach out sooner or something to that capacity. One of the ways to get on someone's radar is to comment on their content. Sure. Unless there's some mega superstar, they're most likely reading a majority of their content. We have a guy that has probably been trolling us on our YouTube videos for the last however many months. And I don't think he particularly likes us that much, but it's a very kind of like aggressive trolly scenario. I've read just about everything this guy's written, and he's not even particularly nice. So imagine if you were nice, how quickly you could get on someone's radar. Then that's 3 C's down. Then finally you move into the space of creation, because it is hard and it is daunting. And do I have the right camera? Is what I'm writing compelling and interesting and valuable to anyone? Is the audio that I'm producing in any way, shape, or form listenable? You're probably still going to be really rough and raw because it's your first time doing anything. I remember the first time I went into the gym, I could barely bench the bar off of my chest because I was a puny little 18-year-old. And it's literally the exact same metaphor, the same way that the first time someone invests and they put $50 or $100 into something, and it feels so puny compared to Mark Cuban's a billionaire and so got a crazy return in whatever period of time. Like, it feels inadequate, but that's part of the human experience. And you've got to basically decide, either I want the benefits and the opportunities that sit on the other side of this discomfort, or I don't.
How do you discern, and this is a question that Ryan and I field all the time, right? We're not in the business of creating the content for our clients. We're in the business of helping them understand what content they need to create and when and where. So how do you help a company like ours and our clients discern when they need to reach out to a company like yours for help?
So it's a very simple calculation. We sell 2 things. We sell time and expertise. So the time part is, we've had people come to us and be like, I tried to set up this webcam and get the color balance right on my video and set up the mic, and it took me 8 hours, and I was a wreck afterwards, and I had to go drink 3 glasses of wine to like deal with the anxiety that I was handling. And that's an extreme example, but you can see how that could just be devastating for your productivity. Other clients that might be, high-level executives and have to deal with 7 to 10 meetings on a daily basis simply don't have the time or the team to go leverage against their content creation goals. And then at the same time, the expertise side is, unfortunately, or I guess fortunately, we have some hard-earned lessons from having done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of videos, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of podcasts that you're going to get access to, and you're not going to necessarily trip and stumble over all those same mistakes.
That's such a great point with everything. I love that you said that. I got to make a note of that, because like, as a service provider, like, we've failed a million times, and you're paying not to fail, because we can navigate all those failures and get you straight, to the point faster.
Yeah. And the flip side is there's plenty of people that are, just getting started, and they don't have the budget, and they have to go experiment in the woods by themselves. And they'll probably be better customers or clients in the future for that, because number one, we've hopefully given them some basic actionable advice that they can go take and use on their own. And simultaneously, by having done it, they'll appreciate the complexity and the work that goes into it. And that's, it's very easy to delineate when people come to us. There's some people that are just like, yo, like I've tried it. It takes forever. Like this by myself took me 3 days to do. If I could come in and spend 2 hours on it, and you guys, handle all those other 3 days to complete, that's worth it, because I know what my time's worth in my business.
Absolutely. If you could, one thing I was looking at too with all of your content is when you grab a hold of a YouTube, I guess the way you guys did, you've grown a lot, I think, over the last year. I think I read you tripled or something like that. I was just reading. When you really started honing in on it, what were the actionable steps that you started taking to improve the user experience and to make it consumable? What's the, like, go as far to say how to make people click the video? How did you keep people? You started looking at Google Analytics, and then you started noticing the retention was down. And I'm sure that influenced a lot of the changes that took place.
So the starting point goes even one step before that, which is you don't know what you don't know. And we know that we want to be more successful there. And we didn't even necessarily know exactly how to accomplish that. And the way that I learn is by paying as close a freaking attention as I can to the people that seem to have figured it out already. So I wanted to figure out content marketing. You referenced VaynerMedia and Gary Vaynerchuk. I look at Emily Weiss from Glossier. I look at these type of characters, and then I go listen to every single keynote that they've ever given, every single interview that they've ever done. So to that effect, if you know anything about YouTube, you know that Mr. Beast is winning on YouTube right now. So I simply went and found the videos of him talking about what he knew about YouTube, or people breaking down how he's done what he's done. And the thing that always comes back to is, number one is video retention. And number two is your thumbnail, which is the static image that someone sees before they click on that YouTube video. That is effectively, and this is my language that we use internally at Piper, that is your movie poster. And so that's an important analogy for a couple reasons. And I'll come back to the retention point for video viewership. With a movie poster, and I always think about like the Fast and the Furious, because I've probably watched all those movies, and they do a fantastic job of marketing and blowing that thing up. It is an enormous commercial success, right? So in the movie, Vin Diesel, The Rock, Tyrese, all these people are flying through windows. They're getting dirty. They're also delivering some absolutely hilarious lines. But in the movie poster, none of those images are stills from like the middle of the video. What happened on the day of the movie poster was they all came in and they were done up perfectly. The Rock probably rubbed some baby oil on his arms. And this is the epitome and the ideal of who these movie stars are and what they're about. And you know that when you sign up to go to a Fast and Furious movie, maybe you've never seen it before, I'm going to get The Rock. I'm going to get Vin Diesel. I'm going to get these people looking good. And maybe there's cars shooting over their shoulders. There's going to be crazy car crashes. It's a very visually clear, with very few words, what I'm buying when I go to see that movie. And then it obviously delivers on that promise. Your thumbnail works the exact same way. So if I'm breaking down, what it means that Airbnb tripled in value upon its initial public offering, then I probably need to put Brian Chesky's face, the Airbnb logo, some symbol that is synonymous with an equity going up in price. And that's then what I need to deliver on in my video. And so that's the job of the thumbnail. We spent a ton of time simplifying that, putting less words on the thumbnail, more, say more with less, pictures worth 1,000 words, all those analogies. And then from a retention standpoint, the reason Mr. Beast is so successful is he has something that people have called the Jenga style of video, which is, how the video ends. The video ends with him giving someone a car, with something blowing up, someone getting some amazing prize, us, dropping this, parachute of money on these three people or something like that. You already know how it ends, but you want to see that ending, and you want to see how they get to that ending. So they give that to you right at the beginning, and then they hang you on through the remainder of the video in order to get you there. And so his retention is just astronomical. And YouTube very simply says, people like watching this. They click on it. often, and then they watch a majority of it. Let's show it to more people. It's not a particularly complex equation there. And so similarly, I don't have the capacity yet to give, cars and truckloads of money away. But what we do have the capacity to do with every single video is let them know right off the bat with a teaser, to create open loops that the viewer then wants to close by continuing on into the video. So I'll say in this video, we're going to talk about X, and then we're going to talk about Y. And I might, use some subtle techniques of copywriting to kind of leave that open-ended, or feel like there's some loop that needs to be closed based off of the statement that just opened up that loop. And then we deliver on that later in the video. And we've seen, literally the one of the latest Piper rundowns that we dropped has tripled the average view duration for that video from what we were averaging at the beginning of 2020. And it's just through iteration. It's just like, wow, that didn't work. Wow, this video didn't land with people. We didn't retain anyone. Let's figure out what was different about that one versus the one that had the great retention.
I love it. And I think you guys do a fantastic job with your thumbnails. And what's I've learned in this conversation over the last 90 seconds is how much time you put into those. Because frankly, and this isn't to sound negative, but excuse me, they look and feel very simple and clear, but the amount of work that goes into them is the opposite.
There's some quote, and I should have this one down because I use it enough, but I always butcher it. And it goes, some poet, he goes, for the simplicity on this side of complexity, I wouldn't give a fig, but for the simplicity on the other side of complexity, I would give everything. And that's a model that I really use for a lot of work, which is the best people, it looks simple. Like you watch a Mr. Beast video, they're pretty simple. Like the thumbnails, all this stuff, it's exceptionally simple from a consumption standpoint. But what that's actually doing is it's making me burn less calories in my head in order to consume what it is that he's presenting me. And that's your job fundamentally as a salesperson, as a marketer, is not to water stuff down so much to the point that it loses all meaning, but to simplify and, like a sculptor, carving away everything that isn't that sculpture that you're trying to make. That's your job when you're doing any form of informing, entertaining storytelling, is to strip all of the other stuff away. Once again, the artifice, it's the same idea. We're stripping all that away to deliver simplicity to the viewer because that's what they want.
Kristen, just make a note of the time here because this is that was,
right that was awesome. It really triggered something with me that made me think about if that could be probably used as a bunch of things, but editing in a nutshell, just to say of what you're trying to do is take away all the things that don't matter and the dead space and the stuff that doesn't add to the context. And that's a really cool way to think about it. When you guys started on YouTube, when did you start to see the traction? How much time were you putting in when you were figuring out those thumbnails? I'm sure it was a step-by-step process. When did you really think you had something and you started to figure out the platform? How many months or weeks or whatever did you think it took you to kind of get your foot in the door?
So we did a retrospective on 2020, and literally what we saw was a really low day-to-day growth or kind of engagement for the first quarter, and then a slight tick upward in Q2 and a slight tick upward in Q3. And then the effective level of Q4 was much greater than any of those 3 quarters. So the core lesson there is, much like investing, nothing is exponential, nothing is particularly step change, although these are crazy markets where that actually tends to occur every once in a while. But the reality is that, we noticed, we didn't even really decide to go all in on YouTube until the end of Q1 2020 because we were focused on a lot of other things. I was expecting to triple my public speaking business in 2020, and that opportunity went out the window. We had 2 booked at as of the middle of Q1, and then everything dried up. So we had to refocus our attention and adapt on the fly to really focus on growth in another arena. And given that everyone was stuck inside, that, you can never extinguish the library that is Netflix, but there wasn't any live sports to compete with. We said, this is the opportunity where there's going to be an explosion in viewership on YouTube, and there's going to be a dearth of content to meet those needs. And so that's where we put the focus in. And then, from there, it would be different little things because, I got the movie poster analogy for thumbnails. And then frankly, and this is a challenge of running a team, it took a couple weeks for that to land with the team. Like it was the same piece of feedback 4 times to the person designing the thumbnails. And then they're changing their style all of a sudden. And then it translates into our click-through rate improving by 1 or 2%. And then the light bulb's on. And they're like, well, of course, thumbnails and movie posters. We're like, well, I was saying that for 2 weeks before it landed. So, and in the same sense, it's looking clear-eyed and being like, man, look at this data. And the YouTube data is fantastic. Look at how people fall off a cliff at the 25th second of these videos. Why is that occurring? Well, it's because we're doing an ad read for one of our partners as part of the deal to monetize this show. So how are we going to make that more engaging? So we played with 2 different ideas. One is me dancing while Hannah does the live ad read. And the other thing that we're doing is, basically allowing a super algorithm to do it on our behalf. So I open TikTok, I see a ton of dog videos. I really love dogs. And there are some absolutely hilarious videos of dogs, running with a stick, not being able to get in the door because it's like, too wide for the door, something silly like that. So every time I find one that just tickles my funny bone, I share that with the editor, and that plays beside Hannah, which is probably better than my dancing, while she's doing the ad read. So we're still meeting every single obligation to our partner. And in fact, we're probably delivering better than we were previously because now a bunch of people aren't clicking away while that ad read is occurring. They're
actually watching the ad. Yeah.
You're actually you're hacking. You're literally hacking the whole thing right there.
Yeah. Exactly. But it's fundamentally about understanding and empathizing with what the viewer is there to do. Like I know I'm on a podcast, an ad read starts happening, click forward 15 seconds, still going, click forward 15 seconds. If I'm on a YouTube video and they start doing their, ad read for one of the companies that we could probably all name that do these YouTube ad campaigns, forward 5, still going, forward 5 more. So I know that that's occurring. I'm not so self-centered to think like, I'm the only person that does this. Everyone does it. So act accordingly.
Cool.
Aaron, just on my notes, I want to ask you, and then I have other selfish questions to ask as well, but I want to give the audience some value. Where are you guys, if any, advertising at the moment?
So we spend nothing on advertising. And the kind of core idea there and the framework that I've used is, number one, when you spend on advertising, those are dollars that you can never, ever get back. Once it's spent, it's spent. And the great advertisers, they have a ROAS where they say, we put $1 in, we get $5 back. Just candidly, we haven't figured out how to do that yet. As soon as I figure out how to do that, I can guarantee you I'll be, spinning up lines of credit and figuring out how to do that, because that's fantastic, right? Turning $1 into $5, magic. The way that we approach that is, we know that every dollar that I'm spending on more content creators, we just brought another one, Kelsey, she's fantastic. She's helping produce podcast episodes. Every dollar that I spend there is stuff that we will own the rights to forever. It's stuff that we will be able to reuse. It's stuff that will have a potential to compound in value for us. And it's like an investment strategy. Instead of making some sort of speculative bet, I'm buying a call, I'm buying a put, and it has an expiration, it's either going to play out or not. I know that I'm just putting chips in, not necessarily on blue chip equities, but I'm placing my bets into the equity of audience building. And the core insight is that most of that, the way that'll be monetized down the line, is being able to go to that well of an audience over and over again and find new novel ways to provide them value and also monetize and grow Piper's revenue.
Love that.
That's awesome. And before when you were on here, we were talking about podcasting, and I was mentioning really, besides the podcast itself, networking capabilities through podcasting is so big, especially professionally. I know a lot of advisors are capable of doing a podcast. Not everybody, but we started getting into the system where we would show up somewhere, with a simple tripod. I would attach my phone to it. We would record it, and we would have a little microphone. So I would have audio and we would have the video and put them up on YouTube and be able to, build it that way. And it was really like, people really seem to appreciate that, of having that all set up and giving them a platform. So why don't you talk about how you started and how that allowed you to step into Piper Creative?
Yeah. And I think it's so relevant for the financial industry. I'm actually listening to, what's his name? Ricketts, biography right now, creator of Ameritrade. And he talks about in his early days, like he was making cold calls or he was, walking straight into businesses, asking to talk about, their credit or their books or these really personal things. It's exceptionally hard to do that. And so really, what it is it's a proxy for trust. You get around people and it's kind of, one of the dark secrets I would say of human nature is we're pattern matching. So if I've spent time with you, and the digital space is better than no space, but physical space is even better. If I've, sat on a couch with you 5 times and you've never attacked me, I have a little bit more trust with you just from the pattern matching of these 5 instances we've been around each other. You haven't attacked me. And it's so, that seems so simplistic, but once again, you have to respect the kind of core mechanisms of your own brain and all our brains that served us well evolutionarily throughout time and to get us to where we are now. And so that's almost like the presupposition of some of these podcast episodes and why I've always tried to do them in person, pandemic notwithstanding here, is because I want to get proximate to these people that are really high level operators and executives, absorb just through osmosis a little bit of how they roll. Oh, this person is like devastatingly efficient with their time. And when they said I got an hour, that literally meant 59 minutes and 37 seconds because they need 20 seconds to switch queues before their next meeting. That's interesting. I'm going to see if I can kind of adopt that and assimilate that in some way. And then similarly, it goes beyond. So if you're going in there nakedly to grow your business, and that's the whole objective, and you're basically taking this like borderline sociopathic framework that says like, what function can you serve me? How can you be useful to me? Purely, simply, nothing else. People are going to read through that. We're once again, base human. We're finely attuned to people that operate in that way. Conversely, if you're coming in and you're genuinely curious and you have fantastic questions because you've actually done your research and pieced apart and tried to understand how I operate, then I'm going to take very kindly to that because frankly, most of my day does not involve people doing that. Outside the people closest to me, most people don't care a lick about anything that I have going on and what I'm up to because they're living their own lives. They're up to their own things and they're kind of, in that world themselves. And so the way the podcast has served me is, number one, it has accelerated my learning to a scarily steep rate, which I needed because I didn't start at a particularly high bar, but it has accelerated my learning. It has given me this network of folks where, the podcast we just dropped is a really, really successful SaaS entrepreneur whose company is doing 9 figures in revenue. He built that puppy as the chief revenue officer, the chief operating officer, and one of the 2 effective founders of where it is today. That's someone I can go get coffee with now and just ask basic questions to. How did you build your sales team? Like, think about that direct line of access. It's transformative. And so if you're looking at through the vantage of not optimizing for earning, but optimizing for learning, you're going to end up in a great place.
That's a great summary of that.
It really is. And I completely agree. Besides different mindsets, different mindsets and things, talking to different people, I've learned so much, especially when, you're trying to provide value for the audience. You're always reaching to try to grab the expert that you consider somebody you look up to. Just being able to talk to those kinds of people is awesome, and learn so much about podcasting and about myself by doing it. And same thing, I love to do it in person. We would take the time to drive 50 minutes or an hour to somebody just because I thought the meeting itself, doing the podcast was such a great connection that just even having the content was a bonus to doing something like that and meeting somebody. How did you feel your quality improved over that year? What were you doing the same thing of looking at YouTube of how to podcast, listening to other podcasts? What kind of things or what kind of steps did you take to improve the quality of it and people actually wanting to consume it and listen to it?
Yeah. So I've been doing the podcast for 4.5 years. So it started with like me just frankly not being an idiot and not asking a robotic set of questions. So I used to like literally just have like my, 18 questions in a row. And I went question 1, question 2, question 3, question 4. And it was just soulless. So I learned to be a better active listener. And then, there's other things like the 11th episode, I interviewed someone in venture capital. In hindsight, I didn't know what the heck venture capital was. So I was putting my foot directly in my mouth, But like now I know what venture capital is, and 200 something odd interviews later, interviewed another venture capitalist in Pittsburgh, and I'm able to ask him, pointed questions about how he thinks about, CAC to LTV and these other metrics that are like make or break for B2B SaaS investing. And the only way I ever got to that point of holding my own was through the repetitions. But simultaneously then going and consuming that type of content. So I listened to a B2B SaaS podcast where he just asked those type of metrics and those type of questions. That escalated my learning. I don't, I do love MBA. I listen to a lot of, sports podcasts to that end. But outside of that, you can ask my fiance for, much to her chagrin, I'm very content to sit and listen to, a biography of a founder of Ameritrade, or, a YouTube channel on, all these different businesses and how they work and their business models. And you can see that in the rundown. It's just me finally, taking my own medicine with the 4 C's, going from consuming, curating, to now creating content, doing the same type of analysis. And because my skin is all the way in the game where someone's going to watch that video and be like, yo, your analysis is absolute crap, I have to do the work beforehand to make sure that it isn't. And that's an amazing forcing function for growth.
Hey, Aaron, we talked earlier about balancing quality in the content and understanding where you're finding that balance. I want to add another layer to it because I think it's important. How do you balance quality in the content with frequency and getting stuff out fast enough versus taking enough time to make it look the part that it needs to look? Because the world that we're in right now is, you could argue speed is maybe one of the most important things that we're fighting against. So I'd like to know, like, does stuff sit? Will you allow stuff to sit for extra days to put the touch on it, the magic touch of editing and making it look the part versus getting it out there faster and being first to market, or having that speed behind you?
So the way I would explain that in the context of Piper is we're just really good at segmenting out each of those. Each of those ideas has its place, and I think the right analogy here is Danny Meyer's kind of restaurant pyramid. So he is the creator of Shake Shack, and he also owns like Michelin star restaurants in like downtown Manhattan and places like that. And he has some other kind of like, nicer than Shake Shack, less than a Michelin star type of restaurants that kind of make up this hierarchy. And, what he does is he goes from, flinging burgers and, making fries and having some great manager there. And that manager says, I want to make more money. I want more responsibility. I want like a higher ideal. Okay, you're elevated to the team at this restaurant. And then some chef is working in one of his Michelin star restaurants, is super talented and has the ability to potentially, run their own kitchen. Boom, we have a network where you can now become the head chef at this kitchen over here. We're way, way, way smaller, less prestigious, less successful than that framework. But that's a framework that I really admire, which is, we have a new intern come in, we call them apprentices, but a new intern come in, and they're doing the most rudimentary, basic, simple productions. And as they prove their skills, as they get some iterations, they then get to move to the stuff that we have a higher standard for quality for. Similarly, within the cadence, our rundowns get turned around same day. We shoot them at 8 a.m. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and they're up usually by like 3 p.m. that same day. So there is a degree of cookie cutter, replicable patterns of productivity there. But our vlog, which comes out once a week, is scheduled weeks in advance. We already know the episode that we're going to drop on the last Thursday of January. And the steps are already in place to start assembling the creative to make that thing function. So basically what we've done is, and then we're, on the other end of the super fast, super kind of immature and unrefined, we're posting TikToks every day, Instagram stories every day, things like that.
So you're respecting the channel and the medium based on...
Certainly respecting the channel and the medium, but also just giving these places for different paces and different kind of standards for quality. Because someone produces a vlog and candidly, it doesn't get the same engagement as the rundown. It doesn't get the same type of consumption. It's not returning the same ROI most of the time. However, there is a shelf life to some of the rundown episodes where if I'm talking about, I guess Google antitrust is probably going to be going on for a couple of years here now, but I'm trying to think of like a more of the moment, piece of news. Where is Jack Ma or something like that, which is very like of this moment. And I don't know if we'll necessarily be talking about that explicitly in 7 years. We do have a belief perhaps egotistically, that people are going to come back and watch our vlog from years prior because of what we will have built, and they'll want to understand how we got to where we are. So we're trying to make these things that are a little bit more timeless. And we just understand that, number one, the YouTube algorithm is great at surfacing those older videos. And so that's where that stuff lives. And it's also the sensibility and the timeline that we give the creative who's responsible for that specific piece to turn that thing around.
Love it.
Absolutely. That's really cool. And I completely agree with watching the growth. I think I could see it just by watching a few videos and seeing what you were adding in. And I like how you were kind of documenting it. I was watching the YouTube video from the other Aaron, and assuming there's only two of you. Maybe there's more Aarons in Piper. But
very simple hiring policy.
Yeah. But it's yeah, exactly. But it's cool to show those things about what you guys are learning. I mean, I learned a lot just from watching your videos for a little bit. And one thing I want to talk to you about quickly is monetizing your videos. That's a mixture of obviously attention, but also business grit and understanding that you can probably reach out to people to do that. Did you just find yourself somebody reaching out to you, or were you like, now is the time when I think I'm ready to ask somebody for this?
So the core, that's tricky to piece apart, but the core thesis of Piper, once again, is we're going to build an audience, and then we're going to bring our services and our products to that audience, because that creates a more aggressive flywheel for growth. If we're, selling out tickets for a Going Deep Summit, if we're building a stable of happy clients at Piper, that actually serves to validate our worthiness of being watched, because it speaks to our capacity to execute and operational excellence and that type of stuff. We made a very specific choice with the rundown because of the frequency of it, that there was just going to be a hard, profit and loss, black versus red type of calculation of being able to produce it that frequently and focus on quality enough that it would have to have some form of tangible, immediate ROI. And so what we actually did was we tweeted, hey, we'd maybe been 1 week into the rundown and it was still super, super raw, but we said, hey, if you like us, and we know there's some people that already, liked us and were about what we were doing, you can be one of the first sponsors ever of the Piper Rundown for $1. Email me if you want to learn more. And so we had half a dozen people who were like, that just seems like once again, an asymmetric upside type of bet that I could be one of the early, my brand will be a part of the Piper thing for $1. Why not? But then literally like 2 weeks later, we had done this for 2 weeks. Someone who had not apparently seen that tweet saw that we had these sponsors and was like, how do I sponsor? It's like, well, it's not $1 anymore. I didn't tell them that it was ever $1, but like, here's the price. And then we, frankly, just did the research on, how do you sell ads? What type of metrics are these buyers looking for? How would we even start to calculate the potential ROI of something like this? How can we package it together and sell a bulk of them at a different price? And now it's, something where we're sold probably through Q2 of 2021 with partners, because some of them liked it, saw a return, had people being like, hey, you sponsor the run, like they hear your company. And, that's a huge dopamine hit for someone, once again, to acknowledge something that you've done that was like a strategic, somewhat precise decision, for someone to come back to you and be like, I noticed that very specific thing that you did. They'll take more of that dopamine any day.
That's just, there's also, I joke with people all the time, especially in business, right? There's money that has to be spent, right? So these companies actually, they have to do something with these dollars. And when something creative or new or fun comes along, like an offer that you put out there, or they see that there's an opportunity to be a part of that, why not take that chance? So that's just brilliant. Well done by you guys.
Thanks.
Last thing I'll grab, I guess, when I'm thinking about this is we've been talking a lot about data, and like I was saying, with you really focusing on the retention. Were you always focusing on data? Did you find you lean too much on the creative? When did you start really getting into analytics, and what do you think people are missing out on by not focusing on that?
So I would probably skew still to out on data for most people's liking, most marketers' liking. And the framework, like, I don't have the perfectly articulated explanation as to why. I just know that pure like the pure data wonkery starts to feel soulless in its execution to me. And I think that what it kind of comes down to is my implicit calculation is if you are purely um, if you are purely data centric in your marketing approach, what you're probably doing that you don't realize is optimizing for short term ROI at the expense of long term ROI, which I would say is a proxy effectively for brand. And where I basically fall on that spectrum, perhaps to my detriment, is I've so trained my mind to be oriented around delayed gratification and long term benefit that I'm very hesitant to ever push too far into the data optimization because I fear that risk of damaging long-term brand equity, damaging that kind of long-term thing that I believe that I'm building. But that being said, you should still be making data-informed decisions, and stuff like the retention on YouTube or the search terms that we're ranking for and things like that. Really, you aren't necessarily in any way, shape, or form connecting to that risk. And so that's where we spend our time. We're very aware of the words that our websites rank for on Google. We're aware of the retention numbers and the enormous suite of data that YouTube offers, and we're just kind of using that to learn more about what we're doing, how it can improve, and simultaneously, like, what does this algorithm want? Every single one of these platforms, it's an algorithm, right? Microsoft in 2019 made the decision, hey, there's going to be way more content on LinkedIn. And then in 2018. Late 2018, there's going to be video. Late 2019, there's going to be live video. And we can go through all these kind of historical markers, but when companies do that, they prioritize the new feature because they're trying to get people to adopt it. Right now, the opportunity is to do short form vertical video on Instagram in the exact same style as a TikTok, because Instagram, owned by Facebook, super worried about TikTok. Their Reels product is competing with TikTok for that type of attention. So we moved a bunch of the cutouts and micro content that we produce as a part of the Piper Rundown from being a longer form IGTV style video, which is what Instagram was focusing on back early 2020, late 2019. We went from focusing on that to focusing on Instagram stories, which is what they're focusing on most of 2020, to now Reels, which is their priority here in late 2020, early 2021.
Hey, Aaron, I know while I have you, I want to ask this question. I know you guys in Piper spent a lot of time as LinkedIn was having its moment, especially I think late 2018, and I would say 2019. I paid a lot of attention where you were having in-person events and teaching folks the ways to take advantage of the attention that was happening on LinkedIn. Obviously, COVID washed those events up. But my question to you is, and excuse the barking dog in the background, my question to you is, did you guys stop doing that? Did COVID stop doing that for you? Do you do that virtually now? Is that something you still believe in? Like, what's your overarching kind of view on all of that, LinkedIn specifically?
COVID stopped us from doing that. I think that our last two were like late January and mid-December, right before. So we didn't schedule it in February just because we were gearing up for our big annual conference, the Going Deep Summit, which was supposed to be at the end of March, which we obviously canceled or postponed. That's what I should be saying. And we've been very hesitant to do virtual events because candidly, I think a lot of them suck. And I don't want to do something that sucks. And once again, to that long-term brand damage, that's really frankly the calculation that I'm making. I don't feel good. I've yet to do the event that was virtual that I'm like, man, that was just so like worth the money. But with our live events, every single year we've seen a significant uptick in. We put next year's event, we call them blind faith tickets. You don't know who's speaking. You don't know exactly where the venue is. We're just telling you that it's going to happen next year. Each year after the summit, we sold blind faith tickets, and we saw an increase in those blind ticket blind faith tickets that were sold, which I see, once again, data informed, as an indicator that the brand is working, the brand is resonant with people, and they're in for another one because of the value that they perceive to have had from the first event or the most recent event. And so it's the same type of thing where I could teach people about LinkedIn virtually, but when I put so much, and this is almost a potential paradox, I put so much content out for free, it's hard for me to even necessarily justify doing it virtually when I put so much of that content out for free. It almost feels like I would be over monetizing them when that's kind of already the ethos. And the real value of that in-person learning, I think, is that number one, it's just more resonant. When you're in a room with like 15 other people and someone's looking you in the eye being like, you're literally being dumb and missing an enormous opportunity if you don't act. It like, once again, basic biology, like it feels real. And that's really kind of, and then also just the live Q&A, like fast-paced, immediate response. And we have videos like this. If you want to go to old videos on our channel, like you can kind of see as a proxy what that's like. But, you know, we did a 2-hour workshop and ended up probably going 2 hours and 20 minutes. Literally like 60 to 80 minutes of it was just Q&A with like an audience of 15 people. That's insane ROI. And every single one of them like wrote a positive review, recommended it to friends, promoted the event on our behalf when the next one had tickets for sale. And I just, you know, you could go the whole other opposite direction. Man, Aaron, you have some like real, you know, blocks and like psychological barriers to like not kind of pushing outside your edge and pushing out your comfort zone to like break out of that framework. But I just love the feeling of those efforts compounding so much that I've been hesitant to skew away from that. And luckily, we haven't needed it. We're going to end up basically flat from a revenue standpoint. We are about to. We basically ended up flat from a revenue standpoint, 2019 to 2020. And that's because of the relevance of the offerings that we have. And, you know, a lot of companies weren't in that position. We couldn't do in-person shoots for like 3 months. No one was comfortable doing it. Now we do them socially distanced. So, you know, that's just kind of been the position. If I really needed to monetize, I have that audience. I have that where I probably could. We thought about doing these other kind of like on course and stuff, which we'll probably end up doing. It just wasn't the right time. And that's more intuitive as opposed to data backed.
Love it. Hey, you're right. I think I personally have yet to be wowed by one of these events, you know, in the same vein.
You're right. You just lose a little bit of the magic. There definitely is something there to being in person. I always loved doing that. I always felt like we were even talking, Corey and I talking about doing an event when we're able to do this. Bringing everybody together in the same room is not the same as sitting on here in a big Zoom call. You know what I mean? It's just not. When you're all together and you're interacting and you can turn to somebody and you feel energy and the gestures and all that stuff that actually comes with being a human being, it's completely different. So while I think virtual may be definitely something that carries forward, I know people are going to be excited to see people again. So I'll be excited to try another live event. And it sounds like as soon as it turns back on, you're going to be all over it, just like you were, you know, in 2019.
For sure.
Cool. I appreciate. Do you have any other questions, Corey?
No, I mean, in respect to your time, you've hung with us for about an hour, and I'm more than grateful. And you've been a terrific guest and provided a lot of value and a lot of information to all of us.
If there are any audience questions, I have a little more time. If people have stuff they want to go over, I'm happy to, not to, you know.
No, absolutely. Guys, please get your questions in. More so people just kind of making comments and agreeing based off of your insights. But if you guys have any specific questions, let Aaron know.
Do you guys travel for shoots? You know, let's just say someone, you know, needed you guys to meet them at their location and it requires a flight or a decent drive. Is that something Piper does?
Yeah, so we've served clients in Chicago, New York, DC. Like I said, we're based in Pittsburgh, so in California too, actually. And so, in certain instances, you can see how those type of markets, you know, we're potentially just price competitive from the fact that we're not, you know, paying those costs associated with real estate, labor, and taxes. But beyond that, the way that we tend to model our services is around you know, being deeply empathetic to trying to get that bang for your buck. So we're talking right now with someone in Chicago. about trying to set up a shoot. And he was like, I need these, 4 videos. Like, okay, well, we kind of have this fixed fee associated with coming in and shooting something in person. And from a post-production standpoint, there's a difference, but not a huge difference between 4 videos and 12 videos. So could we brainstorm 8 other ideas and kind of, crank the ROI from this, effort to coordinate and pay and all that other stuff. And basically what you're doing is amortizing the cost of that production shoot over more videos and more output at the end. So that's really the kind of model that we use for those types of instances. But we also have plenty of people that just, submit stuff remotely that they've either shot or recorded, and we're just, serving as pure post-production.
What's next for you guys? So talent wise, I always think Ryan and I always talk about like where's the puck going? Like, where do we need to focus our help on? Is that TikTok? Like, so where do you spend, not the platform, but what talent do you see Piper needing the most of in terms of helping you guys continue to grow what you're building?
So we're kind of a weird case in that 100% of our business is basically inbound, or something as simple as like me making a post, like the $1 for a rundown sponsorship thing, and then people coming in and being like, yeah, I'll buy that. So like we can, it's crazy when you have an audience. Like we can test. We've been like, hey, we're thinking of doing this online course where we would train you to effectively be a creative, like one we would hire. And the reason for that is we think that's going to be, we literally think we're at like the precipice of that being a exceptionally relevant skill set over the next like 5 to 10 years. So almost in the same spirit as like a Lambda school or something, where we just kind of see, once again, the puck's going to this skill set. How could we build those people? And we did a poll where it's like, are you ready now? Would you be ready in the future or never? And we actually saw like more people saying in the future as opposed to now, which was super interesting. But like, my core idea is that if you can create compelling content on these platforms, you are going to have an enormous advantage and an enormous amount of growth and job opportunities. So we're looking for those people. We brought on Kelsey because she's already demonstrated through being an intern that that's something she's capable of and willing, and that's why we wanted her on our team. And so with the inbound leads model, we're very admin light, and I'm trying to just build this stable of creatives. And then my world is basically, I have this amount of capacity every single week in terms of hours, brain power, skills, talents of my creative team. And then what fluctuates week to week is our client obligations. Sometimes we have a bunch of client projects and that fills up all the capacity. Sometimes we have very little, but basically what's left over then gets allocated against Piper's needs from a content perspective, rundown, vlog, but then all sorts of other experiments down the pike. And so I'm really, frankly, just trying to amass as much of that talent as possible. And then I know what I've learned through 3 years of doing this is that once our client obligations have met, I will never, ever run out of ideas for other experiments, pieces of content, ideas that could work and could spring the next lever of growth.
Yep.
So when you're looking for a title of a person, would you call it, you say creative, would you call it a curator, a videographer? Is there people who basically just do it all? So when you think of a creative, what exactly are you hiring? Just somebody who shows that they can make good content?
Yeah, so the modern term is usually videographer, and that also speaks a little bit to like a capacity to operate a camera.
Right.
But really, like, what most YouTube people will tell you is thumbnail graphic designers are an underrated skill set. You could probably find someone, if you had that skill set, and say, here, I made these 10 new thumbnails that are probably better than what you already have in place. And that won't work for like the biggest creators because they've probably already got it figured out. But like at that next tier, they probably need help there. And if you can demonstrate that you can do that, that's super compelling. Or similarly, there's real technique and skill going on in TikTok videos. So if you know all the functionality of that, or if in Adobe Premiere, you're capable of creating something super entertaining and compelling, like that's this post-production skill set that, a certain demo completely gets and another demo hasn't yet quite caught up to how immensely valuable that is. But it's going to be, I don't want to say the cost of doing business. I think that that's a little bit over the top. I think that there's still great service providers who can just they've amassed enough reputational capital to just kind of keep that ball rolling and continue to execute. But if you're trying in any way, shape, or form to accelerate that, grow that, instigate that reputational capital ball, that's the skill set that's most likely going to do it.
You know what's so fascinating, and we could go on for hours on this. They're still not teaching this shit in college.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't understand it. So it's up to the businesses to teach the kids who should know this stuff.
Infrastructure can never move as fast as culture, I feel like. So things are always gonna speed up, I guess. And I guess that's why people always say when you get into real life, it's always different, because by the time you go through 4 years of college, maybe you step into, it's trying to update, but the real world's always moving faster than the establishment. I really appreciate your time, Aaron, and giving us all these insights and watching you guys grow. Watching from the beginning while I'll continue to watch will be awesome. I've tagged you in our last post, and I'll make sure I do it on this video. So if anybody wants to check out Aaron, Piper Creative, go over to their page, see some of the things we're talking about, especially the Piper Rundown. Super fun to watch, and jump on YouTube so you can grab a few actionable steps. I really appreciate you being here, and thanks so much. And I hope you have an awesome rest of your day, Aaron.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys.
It's good to meet you.
Take it easy. So one of the things I think I take away from quality is always the definition of it, that I really liked how he set this up, was that quality doesn't necessarily mean the best camera or things like that. Quality still goes back to the message, and it's something that he describes as intuitive. And it's funny when you talk to somebody who has such a creative side that there's no definitive answer that I think comes with content and how things are made, because it's always got to be a little bit about you, and there's always that gray area that we play in. I really, I appreciate, Aaron coming on, giving us all those insights, and he's talked to so many successful people. I imagine that drives him forward as well. It drives his mindset.
There's a lot there. I think, if there's, what Piper provides, I think would be second and tier level stuff for some of the folks that you and I talk to and engage with on a daily basis. So there are definitely advisors at a certain level that could work closely with the Piper creative team and start to build a library of content that would, help their business go to that, take their business up a level. But he just provided so much, just for me to think about as a creative person, just so much good content there. And we'll have a million clips that we can find out of this video.
Yep. My was muted. All right, guys. Appreciate you guys being here. We will see you again tomorrow at 9:30. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot them in the comments below. We'll always be around to answer them after the fact. If you're seeing this, then it's not live. So appreciate you spending some time with us today, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Q. All right.